Hey there everyone, I'm Don, Professor Goway, and welcome to the Goway Pro Travel Tale Podcast. Travel far and travel often. Hey there everyone, I'm Don, Professor Goway, and welcome to the Goway Pro Travel Tale Podcast. Hear from expert guests including conservationists, explorers, tourism professionals and everyday globetrotters to discover fascinating stories in the world of travel and be inspired to travel far and travel often. Listen and subscribe to the Goway Pro Travel Tales on your podcast app of choice or check out episodes on the Goway Pro YouTube channel for video podcasts plus other exciting content on the world of travel with Goway. Inspire, motivate, educate. Write your own travel tale, Goway Pro Travel Tale Podcast. Now, today I'd like to welcome Scott Duncan, who is our Vice President of Technology and Operations. But Scott has not always been the tech head. He was once our head of product back in the day, actually, when I joined the company, which is aging me and probably aging Scott even more.
Very much so.
Scott was, I say, head of product. So how long have you been with Goway, Scott? You're one of the longest serving employees that I know, but I can't remember the dates or the years.
1987.
Okay.
Somewhere in there.
And remember everyone out there that Goway started in 1970. So I think Carolyn Wepler's after you?
After, yep.
Carolyn's our VP of direct sales.
Yeah.
So who's
Pete?
I think Pete Lacey, our CEO. CFO.
Yeah, Pete's in front of
after
me.
Bruce.
I think by a couple of years.
Yeah, after Bruce and Claire, his wife, are the longest serving employees of Goway. So Scott's been with us for a long time and played, I guess, worn many hats. I knew, as I say, was introduced to you when you were product.
Yeah, so I mean, I started off in the groups department, and then moved over to the product side. So I think did product for over 20 years.
Yeah, it was a long time.
Yeah. So VP product and marketing for
forever.
21, 22 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in all that time, I guess before we get into it, the sort of focus of today's podcast is the adventure spirit runs deep in the DNA of Goway, from the owner, Bruce Hodge, who's actually part of the story we're going to talk about today with Scott. But Scott himself is an adventure traveler, as I am. But the two little trips we're going to talk about today, I wouldn't say put me to shame, but had me thinking about whether I'd be that adventurous. Well, one, for sure, the Canning Stock route, which we'll start with. Mm-hmm. And the other one was a trip that Scott did to West Africa, and not the usual suspects of West Africa, but we'll get into that one. That one was really literally out there. So the Canning Stock route is in Western Australia, in Australia. I've heard of it growing up, and my understanding of it is that it was, or is it still a functioning route that they moved stock to and from? Not anymore. So it is historical route, which did what? Do you know the background to it?
So just a little history. I'm not an expert on it, but I think it actually started, literally, discussion started in the start of the 20th century. Mm-hmm. So cattlemen, so basically in Western Australia, in the East Kimberleys and the West Kimberleys. So those who own cattle, let's say in the West Kimberleys, would take their cattle down by the sea down to Perth.
Right.
And those in the East couldn't go the sea route, so couldn't basically head to the coast, hop on a ship and transport the cattle down that way to Perth, where the market was.
Right.
They actually had a bit of a parasite, believe it or not. And they didn't want to put them on the ships and because they figured that the parasite would actually survive the trip. And they didn't want it to arrive down there. So anyways, the guys, the cattlemen in the Eastern Kimberleys wanted to try and figure out how we can get our cattle down to the southern markets.
Down to Perth, right.
Down to Perth. So because they were pretty sure that if they did do it over land, that the issues that they had with the parasites wouldn't survive the trip. And when the cattle got there, they'd be okay.
Cows would survive, but the parasite would die.
Very much so. So, anyways, I believe there was an expedition in the late 1800s that did what really is the Canning Stock route. a couple explorers. This is before Alfred Canning actually surveyed it, but they more or less determined that it was not suitable to take cattle. Okay. Anyways, I guess they kept on talking about it, and they still thought, well, we'll go about surveying the route. So anyways, Alfred Canning, I think this is about 1906, he and I'm not sure, it was four or six other guys, some camels, some horses, and so on and so forth. They basically surveyed the route. It took them 6 months to go from Wiluna in the south up to Halls Creek in the north, 1,850 kilometers.
Right.
So obviously they were looking for water because they determined they were trying to find enough water in grazing areas to move 800 head of cattle on a trip. So they're trying to find wells, positioned
reasonably spaced apart.
It was about a day's travel or 2 days travel, right? So about 30 kilometers apart. And so anyways, they did that, and he determined that they could make it happen so that they could move cattle on it. So I don't think it was until a couple years later where they actually then started working on the track. So,
right.
And I think I saw a figure. I think there was, at that time, there was Canning himself, 30 men, something like 70 camels, 4 wagons.
So they actually carved a pathway.
Well, they knew where they wanted to go. Okay,
lined it out
so more to kind of line it out, and they were kind of going from well to well.
Okay,
and I think they started off with 100 ton of supplies, and they started building out the wells as they went up. So building the well heads and the troughs. Now they also had Aborigines with them to help them find the wells, and I think they ended up building 54 wells at that time. I think there's only 51 right now, I believe.
And the wells now still deliver water?
Not all of them.
No, right. Okay.
Not all of them. So anyways, they got it all built, and then I think the first drove, like the drovers, basically took horses. They didn't even move cattle. I think they took 42 horses down. Fortunately, only 9 survived the trip.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's pretty harsh conditions.
Yeah, no kidding.
So they did start, I think in 1910, moving cattle, okay? But I think between 1910 and even when it finished in 1959, I think there's only 37 complete trips, somewhere in there, like in the 30s.
How many? 30 trips only.
That's all.
Wow.
That's all I meant. Because obviously, I know there was one stretch for about 20 years where they didn't even really move any cattle, just because there was problems with Aboriginals. You're going through
traditional territory.
Traditional territory
to this day, yeah.
Yeah, and as we did on our trip, so there were some problems with that. And one of the problems they actually had when they built these wells, quite different than what we actually experienced on our trip. They needed 3 men to basically crank, with the buckets and all that stuff to
pull the water up.
Pull the water up. So because it was on a lot of Aboriginal existing water, the Aboriginals couldn't get the water, so they were dismantling them. So they had to go back in and rebuild, because let's say
so a well's being dug for water.
Yes.
And the Aboriginal peoples were dismantling the wells.
So a lot of the water that they used were on existing Aboriginal water holes.
Right, but wouldn't the Aboriginals take advantage of the fact there was accessible water?
Right, but they built it so that you needed 3 men to crank the water up out of the hole. So if you're a lone Aboriginal,
it's no good to you.
They couldn't get the water.
So they
up.
just then dismantled it in protest.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And because some Aboriginals were getting killed, and even when we were on this, we had to be really, really careful when we're pulling water up, because you're sitting right over top of this well
hole in the ground, yeah.
And you're cranking up. Maybe you're beside it, or you're trying to pull the bucket out to move it to the side, right? So, I mean, I was always kind of mindful looking down. I was like, well, just don't fall in here, right? I'm not sure I can get out. But so really, it was not that successful for moving cattle.
Yeah,
and
sounds like a lot of work for little return.
Right,
Yeah.
And one of the little historical thing, actually during World War II, they actually spent quite a bit of time working on the track because the Australian government wasn't sure if, with the invasion possibly coming from the north in Australia, they wanted an evacuation route, and it was
really?
actually going to be used to move Australians from the far north Australia down to the south.
Because a lot of people mightn't realise that during the Second World War there was serious concern that Japan would invade Australia, which was one of their final goals, to take Australia. Luckily, they never got there. They did bomb Darwin a few times, actually many times. So I didn't know that. That's interesting. So they're going to use this as an escape route.
So anyways, for the most part, the track wasn't then used since 1959. It became kind of popular in the 70s and 80s. There's a lot of adventurers who were riding bicycles or walking it. All sorts of different types of...
just to give context to that, walking or riding it, how long is it, the canning stock route?
1,850 kilometers.
Right, and this is through some of the driest, harshest desert in the world.
Very, very harsh.
And I knew this anyway, but just based on the posts that you were leaving on your Facebook page, it is like there's no one or anything else out there other than other adventurers either with you or going the opposite direction on the route.
I mean...
So if you get lost or have a problem, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
If you don't have the backup, that is, of course.
Got to be very, very careful, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think the first vehicle that actually traversed the entire length of it from between Wiluna and Halls Creek was only in 1968 or 69.
Wow.
Because the track is not really maintained. Obviously, it's just the vehicles traveling on it.
Are there any literal signposts, or it's very much a GPS journey?
There are some signposts,
right.
So just kind of some tin cans, canning stock route this way.
Yeah, right.
I actually took a picture of it. We came across at least one stop sign.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it was kind of unusual. We didn't expect that.
Well, the government's got to be there somewhere. I guess,
yeah. So anyways, I had known, obviously, went to uni in Australia many years ago.
Oh, you did?
And I was at James Cook University up in Townsville.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
What'd you study?
I was
tourism.
I was. It was industrial location analysis. So really, I was writing computer software in the early days of writing code, and I based it on Mount Isa Mines and the copper refinery in Townsville as to why. Yeah, to why.
Hang on. So you started writing code way back when, and now you don't write code anymore, but you're now in charge of our technology direction. So I thought you sort of, what's a nice word? You were migrated into technology, but you actually sort of went back to where you were educated on to a certain degree. I guess.
To a certain degree. Yeah. So I mean, it just. But I. So anyways, I was in Australia for almost 2 years.
Okay.
Finished my education there, and so I spent a lot of time. Any free time I had off, I had a motorcycle at the time. I would just basically hop on it and just go wherever. If I had a summer or like a week or 2 week break, I would basically. Quite often would hitchhike. I think I've hitchhiked over 30,000 kilometers in Australia.
Really?
I sat down one day, worked that out. So I spent a lot of time in the outback.
Okay.
And
just to jump in here, just to clarify this too, you'll hear it from the next story as well. But Scott has a liking for deserts.
Yeah. No, I've always been pretty fascinated by deserts.
Right.
And so. And I'd heard of the Gun Barrel Highway, which is a fairly famous track in Australia. And I'd heard about the canning stock route, but I didn't know that much about it. So how this trip came about actually started, probably 25 years ago. Okay. And the reason I say that, 20 or 25 years ago when I was in product, we came across a company in Australia that was doing day trips to the Blue Mountains and the Hunter Valley. Mm-hmm. we used to call it back in those days, Australian Eco Adventures, is now, AEA Luxury Tours. And Don Roosevelt was the owner, and we started selling that. So any of our Sydney modules, that went out to the Blue Mountains and Hunter Valley, was on his vehicles, right?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So I've known Don for a long, long time, right? Anyways, kind of fast forward to last year, and Bruce could maybe correct me if I'm wrong. I think the conversation came up at ATE, which is an annual tourism conference.
And just to interject here, Bruce is the owner of the company, he is also an Aussie. Mm-hmm. So yep.
Yeah, so I think Don approached Bruce to see if he maybe might want to do the canning stock route. Don was thinking about doing it. It had been a bucket list item for Don for over 30 years. He told me on this trip. And really, it was going to be at that time. It was going to be Don and his two sons, Tyler and Dane, who did travel on the trip, and it was going to be Bruce and Adam. Okay, yeah. And Bruce's son. So, which made sense. It was going to be a family thing, and so on and so forth.
Father and son adventure.
Yeah, a father-son adventure, which would have been fantastic. And then Adam, became a father.
Yep, he did.
And the timing, which was obviously fantastic, but obviously the timing wasn't great because it didn't really make sense to kind of hop on this journey shortly after, his son arriving, right?
Yeah.
So anyways, Bruce approached me, I guess because he knew I had kind of a fascination for deserts, and said, "Listen, Scott, would you consider coming on this trip with me?" So I thought it was a great opportunity. I was very, very fortunate to be asked and all that stuff. I said, "There's no way I could turn that down."
I was
right?
very jealous.
I knew there would be. I knew you and Pete and a whole bunch of others would be lining up, right? So definitely. I thought, if I don't take it, I know these guys will, right? And I'll be really, really jealous when I hear their stories when I come back. But so anyways, I think this was last November or something like that.
I think from memory too, for those listening to Bruce, our owner, he turned 80 last year. And I believe this was, again, as you say, Don, the other Don, not me, a bucket list idea. And obviously since the company, both respective companies been working together for years, Bruce and Don are good mates, as we say. So it was, a bucket list for Don. And I think it was presented at Bruce's birthday as a birthday gift to Bruce and, of course, Adam at the time. Yeah. And I remember Bruce being very excited when he heard that at his party. And then, as you say, one thing led to another, and Adam couldn't make it for all the right reasons.
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
Welcoming son into the world. So I just want to clarify one thing here too, is the canning stock route is not something Goway sells or is a commercial venture out there. It's something that hardcore adventurers take on their own will as such. And I believe on that note that Don, I spoke to Bruce this morning actually about it, that we were going to have a chat, and he mentioned that I think one of Don's sons is a part-time or a chef or cook, or they like to cook, and the other son is a mechanic.
Yeah,
right.
So basically, Don has twin sons.
Oh, twins.
Yeah, they're twins, Tyler and Dane. Tyler's the mechanic, and he lives in Mandurah, just south of Perth, about an hour south of Perth. And Dane, who actually works in the business, but had a chef background.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and obviously we were all very, very spoiled, with having actually both those guys on the trip, right?
Again, speaking to Bruce's point, they're two good skill sets to have with you when you're in the middle of nowhere breakdown. You got a mechanic, and two, to eat well. And I understand you did eat very well.
Very, very well. Yeah. So as Bruce and Don were at AT, which was in Melbourne this year, they flew out into Perth. I came by the Middle East. I was in the Middle East for a while, and then made my way down to Perth, and we caught up. Tyler had been working on, so we had two vehicles, two Toyota Hilux.
Now these were
drives
purchased for the trip, I believe, and outfitted for the trip. Because again, anyone listening, this is not something you just hop in like you've really got to be serious about your planning and prep, and your backup and everything else like that. So these vehicles were purchased for and kitted out for this particular trip.
I think Tyler worked on it for about 6 months.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
that long.
Yeah,
okay.
and And they thought of everything. I mean, it was the vehicles were impressive. In fact, I probably have more pictures of vehicles than I do of everything else on the trip, right? So, and a white one and a gray one, and they were amazing. But as you said, Don, this is fairly hardcore. It's one of the top 4-wheel drive tracks on the planet, and I don't know if it would be the longest. I don't know on that, but like I said, you're getting close to 2,000 kilometers of 4-wheel drive. Yeah, that's a long way.
Yeah.
But so when we all kind of met up in Mandurah, there was still some more work being done on the vehicles. We then went out there and we, basically had to prep, get fuel, get water, get food. All the camping gear had been was already prepped and all that stuff. Between the 5 of us, Don and Bruce opted for the cots, okay, and Tyler and Dana and I opted for the swags, okay, which is an Aussie term for a tent, right?
Yeah, a swag, when I was on the road as a tour leader, I had a swag. So to me what it was, it's basically a mattress, like a foam mattress that rolls up into a big parcel. So you just roll your bed out in the morning. So you're basically sleeping on the ground, whereas you're saying Bruce and Don were on cots in tents or outside? In tents?
No. But we actually, the one vehicle had literally almost a 180-degree wraparound.
Oh, the wraparound canopy type
canopy,
thing?
Yeah, okay. And sides all came down and zipped up, but they were all enclosed, right?
Okay.
And
so, I'm going to jump around a bit here. Were there many bugs out there?
Flies,
of course.
Yeah.
Can't be in Australia without a fly.
Yeah. So
but
flies.
Nothing mosquitoes, anything like that?
No, didn't notice any mosquitoes. Obviously, we had all the first aid gear in case we ran into any snakes.
Okay, so that's the next question. What wildlife did you come into contact with, if anything, or you might have come into contact? Snakes, obviously, you mentioned one.
Yeah. So, I mean, to be perfectly honest, once again, I've spent a lot of time in different parts of Australia, in different parts of the outback. I guess I was thinking that when once we're on the track and so on and so forth, we're going to see lots of kangaroo. Yeah. And I knew we would see lots of camels because obviously the camels were brought in to open up that part of the world. The camels were originally brought in from the Middle East.
Yep.
Now they're actually exported from Australia back to the Middle East because they're so hardy.
Yeah, well, hardy, and they were left. So to your point, they were brought in particularly to open up the telegraph from Adelaide up to Darwin.
That's right. Yeah.
That was where they were used a lot. And then when that was done, they were let go, to run wild. So their bloodline, I wouldn't say it's pure, but it's very good bloodline. Yeah. And as you say, because they're surviving in the desert, they're very, very hardy.
Yeah.
So they're exported from Australia now back to the Middle East for breeding and for racing.
Yeah. So I think the biggest surprise was the lack of kangaroos.
Well, that's why I was sort of leading that question, because I wouldn't expect cattle or sheep unless they were being pushed, because you're in the desert and it's very, very barren and tough. But I would have expected lizards of some description, and I would have thought kangaroos or maybe even dingoes.
We heard dingoes.
Oh, you heard dingoes?
Heard dingoes,
okay.
Yeah. They're pretty close to one night.
Okay.
Yeah. Obviously, it was pitch black, so when you're in the outback, it's quite dark at night.
Yeah, and the sound of travel. And
Yeah. So, but they sounded...
You must have seen some... Sorry, I'm going to jump around.
Yeah.
You must have seen some amazing sky at night, stars.
Well, Bruce and I have had many chats, since coming back on the trip, and in any ways, some of my friends have asked me, well, what's the highlight of the trip? And I know this is probably going to sound kind of weird, okay, but it's the night sky.
Oh, yeah, I can only imagine.
I think it, and I can remember, camping, in Western Australia somewhere 40 years ago in my tent, and I wouldn't put my head in the tent. I would sleep outside, so I could look at the stars at night.
Yeah, me too.
Watch the satellites going over. Yep. A couple of weeks ago, I was curious, how many stars can you see with the naked eye in Western Australia, which is one of the best places on the planet to see night sky.
Because there's nothing around, as in there's no light pollution, there's nothing.
No. So I think the figure they threw out was 10,000 stars that you could see.
But I guess that's still a lot.
That you could see, like from where you're standing, right? That you could count 10,000, and we could actually see it. I actually have pictures on my phone where you can actually see the Milky Way.
Yeah. See, that's what the reason I asked that is when I heard you were doing it. Like, there's always a thought, a memory that pops into my head when I think about my time traveling and tour leading. It was in Peru. We camped in the middle of nowhere as we're going from one spot to another, and you're at altitude, so the air's even clearer.
Yeah.
And I slept out all the time unless it was raining. I remember one night, just waking up, as I consciously did for the same reasons you said, to see the night. And it was the deepest. Like, I felt like I could literally put my hand up there and you could, wave your hand through the Milky Way. And I can still see it in my head to this day. Yeah. So I could only imagine, and I think you're affirming that fact, that those night skies would just mean deep and...
Yeah, it's pretty special. So if anyone ever gets an opportunity, and you want to really see a night sky, that's where you can see it, right?
Western Australia. Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, like I said, we prepped for a couple of days. I even kind of laughed one time. We were shopping in Mandurah, and I think we were pushing 3 shopping carts of food around, and we went shopping a number of times. I know the one bill was $1,000, right? So I said to the checkout, the person checking us out, I said, "That's going to be your biggest sell today, right?" So she kind of laughed. But
I've got to say, though, around the world in Australia at the moment, $1,000 doesn't get you a lot anymore in the grocery store.
That's why we had to go a few times.
Yeah, a few
right?
times. So,
And so, anyways, we then left, Mandurah, and we drove to Mount Magnet. Mount Magnet.
So, how long before you leave tarmac and hit sand roads?
Yeah. So you basically go to Meekatharra.
Mm-hmm.
So we drove from Perth to Mount Magnet, and Mount Magnet to Meekatharra. So we overnighted in Mount Magnet. So that was kind of our first time,
And you're camping,
getting the gear out and so on and so forth. So bit of a learning curve, okay. And we're packed to the hilt.
Yeah.
Right. So obviously we knew we had quite a journey in front of us. We knew even early on that there might be some problems along the track with water, because they'd had some big heavy rains. In fact, they've had one of the wettest seasons.
Oh, really?
In Western Australia this year, literally in the last 20 or 30 years. So there's a lot of water to the north. And so we, but we still packed as if we're doing the entire route. So you have to, like I said, carry all your water, all your food, all your gear and all that stuff. So we refueled at Meekatharra, did our last kind of shopping bit, and then we once we started heading east towards Wiluna, we were then on a track.
Right.
Okay, the bitumen had stopped, right?
Right.
Or asphalt. So we basically made our way to Wiluna, and that's really where you start the track. So it's kind of the last outpost. And from there, we really started heading straight north, okay?
Oh, so you went south to north.
We went from Wiluna to Halt.
Okay, because I don't have anyone watching this version, I'll put a map up, but I was thinking north-south. You went south-north.
No, we went, because we were started in Perth, right?
Oh, you started in Perth. Okay, sorry, I missed that.
Yeah,
okay, my bad.
We all flew into Perth, right?
Okay,
so, so I think most people do it from north to south.
Yeah, I don't know why I just thought in my head that's where most people, why they do it that way. But
But so anyways, we started in Wiluna, and so then you're on the track, and it's, for the most part, it's the width of a vehicle. It's a sandy track. It's like bull dust, kind of that red dust.
Right.
You are in, it's kind of the 3 deserts, like the little sandy desert, the great sandy desert, and the Gibson desert, right? That's where you pass through, right? So it's like an arid, kind of a scrub bush type desert.
Well, from memory,
lots of spinifex and
and the photos you posted. It's very So I'll get some images from Scott and throw them up here for those watching the visual version of this. It's sand with scrub around you. It's not. It's not Sahara Desert vibe.
No, it's very. I mean, I crossed the Sahara many years ago and all stuff where you see nothing but sand for as far as the eye can see. That's not this trip, right? You're driving on sand most times, but it's just you got, and you'd even have some trees in certain parts. Gum trees in certain parts of it. Desert oaks.
Any billabongs along the way? And for those who don't know, a billabong's like a water hole.
Yeah,
there's a few around.
Yeah. So obviously we were going past lots of dry lakes and stuff like that.
So when you do the trail or the route, be it foot, bike, or vehicle, do you need permission from the government? I know you need certain areas. You need permission from the traditional owners, the Aboriginal peoples.
Yeah.
But do you need a permit? Like a parks permit to do it?
Yeah. I think for each vehicle, double check. I wasn't involved in that. I think Tyler took care of all that stuff. Maybe it was Don. I think I remember them saying that the permit was $250 per vehicle.
That's not that much, yeah.
So because you're obviously traveling through a number of Aboriginal areas, and you just have to kind of get their permission. That's all prearranged, right?
Yeah.
So
and it's generally, it's not a hassle. They will generally rubber stamp the permit to do it. The Aboriginal peoples.
Yep.
Now, did you meet any Aboriginal people or go near or through any of their settlements along the way?
When we came off the track at well 33, we came to an Aboriginal community to get fuel.
Right. So just again, so the wells are numbered 1 through to 50 something. Do they start 51. One in the south going up?
That's right. Yeah. So it. So once just outside, not too far outside Wiluna is well 1. Okay, and the start of the track, and that's really was your itinerary. Okay, we're going to go from well 1 to well 7 today. Okay, and from well 7 to well 11. And Don had researched all that stuff out and had more or less kind of mapped out our route.
Let me ask you: is there an app for it?
Well, we were using fairly detailed apps like maps, because you can go on Google Maps,
right,
and you have to zoom in all the way before the track shows up, right? It's just so you can see it. In fact, amazing enough, I mean, I didn't have Wi-Fi on my phone, but obviously the phone is still tracked, so I knew exactly where we were on track at any given time with my phone.
Right.
Okay. Now I had downloaded some offline maps.
Yep.
And but in the one vehicle we were using some fairly sophisticated tracking, because you just want to make sure that you're not getting lost. Right?
Yeah, because as I started earlier, like you literally cannot afford to get lost anywhere in Western Australia when you get off the main roads, let alone the Canning Stock route, because if you do get lost or have serious issues, there's no one, or if anyone's going to find you, it's going to take a while. So jumping back to that, do you have to tell authorities you're on there in case something goes wrong? Is there a check-in, check-out type setup?
No.
So it's basically get your permit, get the permits for the Aboriginal lands, away you go. Should you get lost or something?
So I don't know if Don or Tyler had basically said, listen, okay, we're departing on this date.
Right.
Okay. Now you have to remember, it's 1,850 kilometers. There are vehicles, okay? Like I said, I believe...
You came across one or two, didn't you? Coming the other way or something?
Well, for the first few days, we hardly saw anybody, okay? Right. Now, I believe over the course of the season, and I don't have maybe the latest information, but so let's say the season maybe goes from May to November. Then you run into, it's just too hot and it becomes too wet. You can't really do it.
Too wet in the desert,
yeah. So I'm not really sure how that part of it worked, right? So Don had kind of had all that stuff. So we didn't basically go to Wiluna, check in with the police, and we just basically picked up some goods and we were off we're going, right? So, but we knew that you're correct. It is very, very remote. But I believe the current figure is up around 1,000 vehicles do it a year. Okay. Now, for the first few days, we only saw 2 or 3. For the first probably 4 or 5 days, like we felt we were on the track by ourselves, right? Once again, knowing that most people come from north to south,
right?
And you just kind of get in your routine, right? So we would normally, like I said, we would pick a well, and that's where we're going to aim for. We might do 100 kilometers a day was kind of the max we were doing. There's a couple of days we pushed a little bit further than that, but you get up, we'd be up at 6 o'clock in the morning. Sun was coming up just shortly after, 5:20 or something. That sun was coming up. So we'd all kind of start to stagger out of our swags around 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. Make fires, okay. Even though we had all the cooking gear, we had all the, but we want to cook over fires here too, right?
That's nice, yeah.
So we always were hunting for firewood, and one of the problems was because they'd had quite a bit of rain in this part of the world,
Everything was wet?
Well, a lot of green.
Damp.
A lot of green.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it was still dry where we were in the south when we were on the track. But you just can't basically go and burn, cut down a tree, or it doesn't burn properly, right? So we're always trying to find dead stuff. But it would normally, the first few days, took us a little while to pack everything all up, and you're getting everything back in the exact same spot. Yeah. You know all about it. Being exactly. An overland guy, right?
Everything in its place, a place for everything.
Yeah. And so we would normally hit the road around 8:30. And we would rotate drivers.
Okay.
So we would two would drive in the morning, two would drive in the afternoon, and one would normally have that day off, right? Because it's not a tough. It's a bit of a tough drive, believe it or not.
Now, driving in conditions like that is taxing, like physically and mentally, because you got to focus. You don't want to make a mistake because you could end up stuck or.
Yeah, the biggest thing that we had was. You've got the track, okay, literally just wide enough for a vehicle to get through, and then you got scrub bush or maybe a small little tree. So you're trying to avoid. So you're constantly just moving the truck, just literally
a little bit left and right. Yeah.
Just fractions, because obviously, before we left, Tyler and Dane put on covering over top of all the vehicles. You can buy kits. It's like a plastic that you put along the sides, and otherwise you wouldn't have any paint on your vehicle when you got to the end of the trip.
So it's like a clear wrap.
Clear wrap. It's a clear wrap. So otherwise, because these are nice vehicles, you want to try and protect them as much as possible, and it is impossible to avoid every single scrub bush. So you're going past, not that fast necessarily. So we might be traveling. You could be traveling 5 kilometers an hour. You could be traveling 60 kilometers an hour, right? But when you're scraping up against some hardy bush. And you're doing that from 8:30 in the morning until about 4:30 in the afternoon. You pass thousands of pieces of scrub bush.
So the boys did a lot of prep, thought about everything, like wrapping the car.
Huge. Yeah.
Now I understand, speaking to Bruce this morning, as part of a backup service where you had Starlink. Starlink, sorry. Starlink with you for access, because while you're away, you and Bruce, Goway launched its new website, and Bruce told me this morning that you were online checking out, making sure that all launched correctly from the middle of WA care of
Starlink. That was so that was the first time I had ever had anything to do with Starlink. I mean, obviously been following what Elon Musk has been doing and putting a lot of Starlinks up there, which I think is great. I mean, prior to, obviously the early explorers, they were on their own.
What's that mean?
I mean, they were, those guys were unbelievably tough.
Well, okay? I was laughing with Bruce this morning. He said, he had the Starlink and stuff, which, again, if you have the tech, use it, because it could save your life. And if nothing goes wrong, it becomes a luxury, and great. But yeah, that's what we were saying, because I said to Bruce, when I was on the road, we didn't have GPS. We didn't have any of this. It was like maps and notes from the previous driver, fax machines, and then you take it a step backwards, back to when they were trying to lay the telegraph north to south. I read a book about it. It's just stunning what they did with the resources compared to what we have today. How tough they were.
Well, I mean, obviously it takes a lot of guts when you start walking into a desert and you're trying to find water.
Yeah.
Because you start getting thirsty after a while. It's like, and there was a couple times I would stand up maybe on one of the sand dunes, and I think there's about 950 sand dunes along the entire trip.
Okay. Not a lot for the length of the trip, is it?
No. And some of the sand dunes would hit about 3 stories in height. But you don't really notice, because you're kind of gradually coming up and you kind of crest over, and then you
so they're not sort of pointy, they're sort of long.
And, And but a couple of times you'd stand there and you're in the middle of no man's land, and you'd just be kind of turning around doing a 360 degrees, and you see nothing. And you think, well, if I was thirsty right now, where would I find water? So you had to be. That's why I can't imagine how much stock they must have lost. Like I said, that first trip where they lost most of the horses, right?
Of the horses. Yeah, I can't remember. You might know the stat because you're a desert freak. But I think it's like a human can only survive like 2 days without water, and then you're in serious trouble.
Yeah. It's pretty serious.
If you're walking, even though the wells might be close as far as a driving thing, but even if the car broke down, walking to the next well could be a challenge. Yeah,
you'd want to be careful. Obviously, we weren't in extreme temperatures. I think daytime.
Well, that's why the question.
When we started
what were the temperatures?
Was probably about 21 degrees Celsius during high for the day.
For Fahrenheit for our US listeners, do you know what that is? Yeah, I don't know either.
Fahrenheit,
I'll tell you what, it's going to be
60.
High 60s, I guess, somewhere around there.
Yeah, somewhere.
And at like midday, early afternoon, what did it get to?
Oh, 21.
Oh, that was the high.
That's the high. 21 Celsius,
Really?
the high. Yes, yeah. Because we're in the south. Remember, wintertime.
Yeah, but still, I know south, but like again, like even as an
So we
Australian, I
actually-
imagine the deserts in Australia are really hot all the time.
No,
Obviously not.
Not all the time. And obviously,
21,
with the deserts, as you well know, it's more the night you have to worry about.
Oh yeah, the night anyway. It's freezing.
Yeah. So it would drop down. I would say most nights was maybe getting down to around 6 or 7 degrees Celsius.
Okay, so I'm gonna.
And the one night we woke up in the morning, we had ice on one of the trucks.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess frost wouldn't surprise me in those conditions.
Yeah.
So I'm going to look it up for US listeners.
I'm going to say it's 68 or 69 degrees Celsius or Fahrenheit. Somewhere in there. So anyways, yeah, that was...
So 6 Celsius, the cold that Scott was through, is about 42 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's cold for a desert anyway. But yeah.
Yeah. And so we had all the creature comforts. I'd never actually slept. I took my Canadian sleeping bag down with me, which had a rating for -30. So I was
That
never.
might have been a little bit extreme. Even
I
for
was
the desert,
never.
yeah.
I was never cold.
Yeah, I
okay.
bet.
I know the other 4 had a few nights where they were
chilly nights.
pretty coolish, but I was normally unzipping my sleeping bag, right? 'Cause-
Does Bruce have like all that type of kit, or did he borrow?
no.
that?
It was all prepared. It was
All supplied?
All supplied.
Wow, what a trip!
Oh yeah, no.
This
no.
should be a commercial venture, I swear.
Yeah, no, we were really spoiled. Like I said, we were not roughing it at all, really. Okay, now Bruce and I are telling a few stories where it sounds like maybe we were, but in all honesty, it was 5-star desert
Camping
trekking.
trip,
Yeah.
Well, again, I don't want people to misunderstand. Because again, Scott will supply me some images, and I'll throw them up for the visual podcast of this, and you'll see how remote it is, or not was, is. But I don't want to underplay the fact, even though Starlink's there and whatnot, you cannot screw around with this particular trip. And it sounds like Don and his boys were very, very well prepared getting this trip, because you said like 6 to 8 months prep for this particular trip.
Yeah.
And luckily, and as we're going to start to wrap things up here, Scott and the boys didn't actually get the whole route done because of conditions, correct?
Yeah,
you had to turn around at well 33, you said.
We turned around at well 33 because of all the water up north, up by Halls Creek, around well 51, Lake Gregory was flooded. Yeah, and they said that it was the biggest they'd seen that lake in some 20 years.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the Canning Sock route goes right by it. So it was all underwater. In fact, even when we were at wells 24 and 25, we had a lot of water that we couldn't get around, and we had to traverse about 5 kilometers off
Yeah, I
track.
remember one of your posts mentioned that, yeah.
Anyways, the one up north, the Army tried to get through it, and they couldn't get through it. We heard, and I can't confirm this, that one outfit made it, but they did like a 50 or 60 kilometer
Detour.
off track.
Right.
And obviously, our biggest concern is obviously the dry spin effects. That accumulates underneath the vehicles, and with the exhaust, the vehicles catch on fire.
Really?
So you got to be really careful. We saw a number of burnt out vehicles.
Really?
Yeah. But so anyways,
Well, so it just gets caught, and then with the heat of the engine and everything else, just
yeah,
combust.
Yeah. So you saw a number of vehicles on the side of the road, like from 20, 25 years ago and all that stuff.
All burnt out.
Yeah, burnt out.
Wow.
So we made it up to 33. And
So how many kilometers would that be? That's like, if you count well,
yeah,
that's over halfway.
It's over halfway. Right. Yeah. I don't know the exact kilometers. It'll be over 1,000 kilometers.
So if you need to turn off at any stage, is it literally just turn left or right, as the case may be?
There's only 2 places. Okay. Oh, sorry, off the track, or
look, basically, if you say, right, I can't go any further, I don't want to go any further. Do you have to turn around, or can you literally just?
When we got to well 33,
right?
If we went any further, if we went up to 51 and couldn't pass, we'd have to come all the way back 4 days to get back to well 33.
Right. So there's.
You can get off at well 22, and you can get off at well 33.
So when you say get off, there is a road that will take you somewhere.
Other tracks heading east and west, and we took another track, the Kidman track, at well 33, and then onto another track from there. And we ended up down in Marble Bar.
Marble Bar, yep.
And we continued down we actually headed further south to Tom Price, was the mining town.
Mm-hmm.
From Tom Price, we went up to Port Hedland.
Right.
We then made our way around to along 80 Mile Beach, stayed on 80 Mile Beach.
Yep.
Then we went through Broome up to Cape Levesque. We stayed up there, and then we made our way back to Broome. So obviously that duration, so we filled that in because our flights were flying on a certain day.
You're filling in time.
We filled that time, and it was great. I mean,
it sounds like a great trip
I mean, because we knew that the first 1,000 kilometers that we did were going to be exactly the same as the next 1,000.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
So you're in the desert, constantly making left turn, right turn, straight, stop, go down a riverbed, so on and so forth. It would have been like that for the next 1,000 kilometers. So it's not for everybody, for sure. If you're a desert guy, you love it, and I loved it. Okay, and we all loved it. But if you are, if you get bored in London or Paris, you wouldn't make it here, right? So
no, what did you say? It's one thing we used to say when we were driving: if the truck got stuck for the first time, all the passengers they loved digging it out. It was so much fun.
Yeah.
You get stuck again, it was it's a little bit of fun. The third time you got stuck, it's like none of the passengers are interested anymore. They leave it to you to get out. So I guess it's the same thing. Like after 2 or 3 days, if it's not your thing, then you're seeing the same thing, which is, I guess, if you like deserts like I do as well, there's beauty in that. But if a desert's a desert to you, then as you say. And again, it's not a commercial venture, but still a lot of people, obviously 1,000 people a year are taking it on.
That's what I think is the number.
Ballpark,
yeah.
Right. So we were going to talk about another adventure. I will tease it because we don't have really time to go into the detail of it. So prior to Scott, or you mentioned you're in the Middle East as well, but prior to all that, Scott went off on his own, as he does. You're a very, I won't say brave solo traveler, but you're one who can deal traveling on your own. Because I think last year or the year before you went off to Eastern Europe on your own for a while and did multiple countries. But that's what we're talking about. So Goway sells most of Africa. We sell some of West Africa, but Scott went off on a trip that even I stand in awe of, in that it was into West Africa. I don't remember the countries. So you went, which were the countries you hit?
So I flew into Morocco.
Right.
And then I went down, headed south from Morocco to disputed territory, Western Sahara.
Western Sahara, yep.
Across Western Sahara, into Mauritania. From Mauritania down through to Senegal. And from Senegal into the Gambia. And then you cross back into Senegal again, because Senegal wraps around the Gambia.
Right.
And then into Guinea-Bissau. And I finished up in Guinea-Bissau and I flew back.
Right. So other than Morocco, most of those other countries, you can visit them, as Scott did, but they're not sort of on the main tourist top 10 list of Africa destinations.
Like in the...
Excluding Morocco.
Yeah, I think I was about 30 days outside of Morocco. I saw 25 other travelers.
Yeah.
Total.
Yeah. Now, the focal point of this trip for you was a train ride, but not a train ride in the traditional sense that most people will be thinking about. It is an iron ore train, which runs from where to where?
Northern Mauritania. Travels from Nouadhibou, which is the second largest city in Mauritania. It's on the coast, just south of Western Sahara territory, and goes to a mine 700 kilometers inland in the Sahara Desert, a place called Zermatt. And so it goes out empty.
Comes back full.
Comes back full, yeah.
So for our listening audience, what was your accommodation on that train?
Well, there's 200 iron ore hopper cars. And on the outbound route, it was in an empty iron ore car. And on the way back, it was sitting on top of a full one. Yeah. So 700 kilometers out, 700 kilometers back, 1,400 kilometers. Just under 40 hours to do that. So
I don't think I asked this when we discussed it. So again, people listening, and again, I'll get the photos from Scott. And it wasn't just you. There were a few other people doing this, correct? Or was it workers going out?
Workers?
Yeah, workers.
I ran into two young German guys on the way up. Yeah. But on the way back, I was the only one on the train. There's a small passenger car at the back.
Oh, there is.
Which is very, 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 very basic.
Right.
Looks like it's from 1910.
Not as basic as sleeping on top of iron ore, though.
Just above.
Just above, really?
Yeah.
Just above.
Just
okay.
above, yeah. You're covered, right?
Okay.
So, but no, that was it. So yeah, pretty.
Right. So so just for clarification, so Scott went out in an empty iron ore car with his sleeping bag, etc., with lots of dust and amazing sunsets over the desert. And when you got there, you just got off your particular car. They loaded it up, like literally.
They drop you off, and then they continue on to the mines. The mines are another 20 kilometers.
Oh, right. So you're not there when they're loading the actual iron ore, right?
No.
And then they come back, stop again, and you just hop on.
You just hop on. It stops there.
Yeah. Was it like, did you pay for this journey?
No.
Oh, you just hop on, hop off, and they don't.
Pretend the hobos from the early days riding the railway cars. They didn't pay either, right? So you're almost like a hobo.
Did they see you get on and they go, "Yeah, it's just a white guy riding the train," type thing, or they didn't even know you were on it?
Yeah, no, there were some people because when we left going out, so they actually make sure there's no one on the track. So they drive the whole 2.5 kilometers, like the railway people. So they would see us there.
Okay, so they see, so they know you're on board, and just it's a West African thing. They doesn't.
Yeah, and
safety standards are not the same as North America.
No.
You
got to be pretty careful. Careful. Yeah, there are some fatalities every year on it.
Right.
So yeah, you got to be careful.
Now again, that was the main draw for this trip, wasn't it? This train journey, and you discovered that where?
I saw it on YouTube about 5 or 6 years ago, and I thought, that sounds pretty cool. And I was all prepared to do it.
Pre-COVID, wasn't it?
I was going to go in April of 2020.
Right.
And I was actually just literally starting to book my flights in February. I'm thinking, I better hold off just for another week or so. And obviously, COVID showed up. So I wasn't sure. It was 4 years later, and I wasn't sure if I was maybe too old to do it. But I thought, now's the time, better do it now or you'll never do it. So
wow. Yeah, so again, I'll throw up some image of that. It was an amazing journey. Again, I'm not sure if it's for me, and I'm pretty adventurous, but because there are other aspects of that trip which are fascinating as well. The fact that you were one of the very few white people, or Europeans, Westerners, whatever you want to term it, in that area, and that your transportation was in these minivans squashed with 20 people for like 8 hours on end. And maybe when I was 20 years younger, maybe right now, am I too old for that? I'm too old for that. Okay, so I'd like to thank Scott for his time today. That was fascinating. So again, just to reiterate, we do not sell the canning stock rook as a commercial venture. We could advise you. We have in-house expertise now. If anyone wanted to take it on, but it's something you would have to do yourself. But it is an amazing journey. The imagery you'll see if you watch this here on YouTube, I think speaks for itself. And as I said at the beginning, the DNA of adventure runs deep here. So it wasn't just Scott, it was our owner at the age of 81 out there doing it as well. And his buddy Don would be about the same age, I guess.
70, yeah.
So they're 70 and his sons as well. So adventurers for anyone of any age, if your heart's still in it, if you want to ride iron ore trains across Western Africa, or take a four-wheel drive through Western Australia, and do the canning stock route. But again, if you have an adventure, Goway can sort it out for you, be it extreme, be it mild. So again, thank you, Scott, for your time. Really appreciate it. It was a fascinating story, man.
Cheers, mate.
Good.